Regular meeting number 60 will now come to order. Please stand for the playing of the national anthem.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Almighty God, we ask for your blessings at special times, at complicated times, all the time. At this time, as many know, we've just marked the coincidence of the American holiday of Thanksgiving and the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. First time they've actually coincided, and given the nature and the quirks of the Jewish calendar, it will be the last time we'll observe them together in our lifetime. Thanksgiving and Hanukkah actually have some interesting themes in common. Both mark and celebrate the struggles and successes of some very determined people who sought to celebrate their faith as they would choose. The Pilgrims of the 1600s and the Maccabees who lived in 165 BC were determined people who took risks spiritually and physically and gave us examples of courage and conviction that will be with us always. The Pilgrims became ancestors of a nation. The Maccabees rededicated their temple, which had been used for pagan worship. The word Hanukkah means dedication, and it well reflects not only what they did, but who they were. Yet we also remember that the Pilgrims and the Maccabees, on achieving their goals, were less than willing to extend religious freedom to others. We admire their dedication, but we choose to devote ourselves to the goals of freedom for all, openness and mutual acceptance, pluralism and diversity. And we believe that one set of goals is not incompatible with the other. Strong commitments do not automatically breed intolerance. Dedication does not need to foster exclusivity. We hope and pray that in each of our celebrations and commemorations, and in all of our interactions in this great chamber for this great city, we will learn from the best examples of our spiritual and historical ancestors, while we also will add, with all respect to their legacy, openness toward new ideas and willingness to keep learning from each other. May God bless us with powerful lessons from which to learn, with the wisdom to do our best with all we have inherited, and with the courage to do our best with and for each other in everything we undertake. And may the holiday seasons around us and before us be times of unlimited blessing to be shared by all, as we say, Amen.
Rabbi, thank you again for answering the call and starting us off so well this evening. We look forward to seeing more of you in the future. Clerk, call the roll.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Can I get a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal?
So move.
Is there a second? Clerk, call the roll.
Greg Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
This week's communications received by the City Clerk's office are listed on the agenda and will be published in the City Bulletin. Are there any other communications to be read into the record?
Yes, President Ginther, as a follow-up to my communication from the November 18th council meeting regarding the initiative petition filed with my office on November 7th, 2013, I received additional communication on Wednesday, November 27th, 2013, and again today from Jeff Mackey, Operations Director, Franklin County Board of Elections, stating the following. In the 2013 general election for the City of Columbus, the following number of voters cast ballots. In Delaware County had 479 voters, Fairfield County had 462 voters, Franklin County had 88,630 voters. The total count is 89,571. 5% of that would equal 4,478 minimum ballot signatures required for that matter.
Thank you. Are there any resolutions or announcements from members of council? Councilmember Craig.
Thank you, President Ginther. I do have two announcements. I want to thank Councilmember Tyson for sharing this announcement. The World AIDS Day was held on 1st December each year, and is an opportunity for people worldwide to unite in the fight against HIV, to show their support for people living with HIV, and to commemorate people who have died. Raising awareness means knowing your status, and we are very fortunate to have an outstanding sexual health program at the Columbus Public Health Department. To schedule a test, please call 614-645-7772. Again, that number is 614-645-7772. And then the Wreaths Across America program is scheduled for Saturday, December the 14th. I want to give special acknowledgement and thanks to Doug Lay, the director of the Franklin County Veterans Service Commission, and staff, certainly for his leadership and their commitment to service, to outstanding service, and providing the following information. This year, the staff and volunteers will be placing wreaths on veterans' graves at the Sunset Cemetery, West Broad Street, Galloway, 480 wreaths on Spanish-American veterans' graves. The Green Lawn Seminary, Green Lawn Avenue, 500 wreaths on veterans' graves in Section 71. Forest Lawn Cemetery, East Broad Street, 200 wreaths in various sections. Dublin Cemetery, West Bridge Street, 286 wreaths on all of the identified veterans' graves. There are over 900 cemeteries across America participating in this program this year. They will be placing a total of 1,477 wreaths, costing approximately $20,000. For additional information and locations, interested parties can get on Google and the Google Web at Wreaths Across America, and then define the location nearest to you. Thank you. That is all that I have this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Craig. Councilmember Klein. President Pro Tem Miller. Councilmember Mills. Councilmember Paley. I would like to note a recent recognition of our great city that we are very proud of. As was noted about a week or so ago, the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index ranks cities on their efforts to create a welcoming and inclusive environment for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. We've recently learned that Columbus has earned a perfect score, 100% on the index. It's a great achievement for our city and further evidence that we are a smart and open community that embraces diversity. And quite honestly, it was due to the efforts of two great staffers, one on council side in Adam Letty in our communications office and Shannon Harden from the mayor's office, that helped the HRC to figure out that they had been not taking our entire record into account when ranking us. So quite honestly, they were behind in ranking us at 100%. So I want to thank Shannon and Adam for their work. And this council put in place, with the support of the mayor, domestic partner benefits, strengthening our anti-discrimination code, and creating a domestic partner registry were critical components for us to reach 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign. So congratulations, Columbus, for a great achievement. Any comments from our elected officials? City Auditor? City Attorney? Sure, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss Judge Barrows if he was down there in front. At this point, I'd like to request at least one ordinance and see if there are any other ordinances to be removed from the consent action portion of the agenda. In Public Safety and Judiciary, Ordinance 2531-2013. Are there any other ordinances to be removed from the consent agenda? If not, may we now have a motion to waive reading of the titles of 30-day legislation by the city clerk?
So moved.
Is there a second? Clerk, call the roll.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Thank you. Will the clerk now read the ordinance numbers of 30-day legislation on tonight's agenda for first reading?
Health and Human Services Committee, Ordinance 2711-2013. Development Committee, Ordinance 2654-2013. Recreation and Parks Committee, Ordinance 2688-2013. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, Ordinance 2591-2013. Public Service and Transportation Committee, Resolution 248X-2013. Ordinances 2719, 2721-2013. Public Utilities Committee, Ordinances 2520, 2573, 2574, 2575, 2576, 2619, 2629, 2648, 2651, 2666, 2702-2013. Rules and Reference Committee, 2635-2013. And that's it. I'm sorry, I'm skipped ahead. Zoning Committee, have a couple there, 2580-2013, 2728, 2760, and 2816-2013. Thank you.
The following ordinances appear on our agenda as consent actions. Will the clerk now read the ordinance numbers of each into the record?
Resolution 258X-2013, Finance Committee. Resolutions 233X-2013, Ordinances 2596, 2709, 2710-2013, Health and Human Services Committee. Ordinance 2564-2013, Development Committee. Ordinances 2707, 2742, 2751, 2753, 2783-2013, Resolutions 255X and 256X-2013, Ordinances 2801, 2803, 2804, 2809, 2815, 2817, 2818, 2819, 2821, and 2823-2013, Recreation and Parks Committee. Ordinances 2624, 2638, 2656, 2684, 2729, 2746, and 2767-2013. Technology Committee. Ordinances 2525, 2587, 2664-2013. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Ordinances 2481, 2657, 2672, 2685, and 2770-2013. Public Service and Transportation Committee. Ordinances 2494, 2546, 2599, 2607, 2620, 2652, 2671, 2676, 2789, 2795, and 2845-2013. Public Utilities Committee. Ordinances 2350, 2484, 2486, 2491, 2516, 2534, 2540, 2590, 2604, 2681-2013. Appointments from the Mayor's Office numbered A0215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 220, 221, 222, 223, 224, 225, 226, 227, 228, 229, and 230-2013.
Thank you. We do have one speaker on the consent agenda this evening, speaking in support of 2803-2013. That is Mr. Nathaniel Wilkins. Mr. Wilkins, welcome to council chambers. If you'd come forward to the podium, share your name, address, any organizations you represent. Sir, you have 3 minutes to speak to the ordinance.
Nathaniel George Wilkins. I'm kind of for this as 189%. I'd just like to see more things to done like this all over Columbus, more conveyance to property owners and titles. So again, I'm for this, but I'd like to see more done in the Central Ohio Area Authority. Thank you again.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Wilkins? Thank you, Mr. Wilkins, for coming down and sharing your thoughts. May I have a motion for approval of these items designated as consent actions? Is there a second? Second. Clerk, call the roll. By voice.
Craig? Yes. Klein? Miller? Mills?
Yes, with the exception of 2350-2013, on which I am abstaining.
Paley? President Ginther?
Yes, consent agenda carries. We will now proceed with the second reading of 30-day table in the emergency legislation. The first committee is the Finance Committee. President Pro Tem Miller will be bringing this legislation forward this evening. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, President Ginther. In the Finance Committee tonight, our first piece of legislation is 2625-2013 to authorize the Finance and Management Director on behalf of the Facility Management Division to modify an existing contract with K&M Cleaning Service Incorporated to provide ongoing custodial services at Columbus Public Health and the Columbus Public Police Academy to waive competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Codes, 1959, to authorize the expenditure of $401,752.70 from the general fund and to declare an emergency. The reason for waiving competitive bid is that these facilities were previously contracted under a separate agreement for custodial services. However, it was discovered that there was a material contract breach on part of the approved vendor. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Next is 2655-2013 to authorize the Finance and Management Director on behalf of Fleet Management Division to issue purchase orders with various vendors to purchase fuel per the terms and conditions of various established contracts to authorize the expenditure of $3 million from the Fleet Management Fund to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Codes 1959 and to declare an emergency. And the reason for waiving competitive bid is that the city does not have a formal cooperative purchasing agreement with Franklin County as it does with the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services. Accordingly, the competitive bidding provision of Columbus City Codes must be again waived in order to participate in this Franklin County fuel contract. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
And last in finance is 2776-2013 to authorize and direct the city auditor to provide for the transfer of $3,124,256 within the general fund to transfer appropriations between objects for certain non-general fund departments and divisions, and to declare an emergency. This ordinance is submitted as an emergency as to allow these financial transactions to be posted in the city's accounting system as soon as possible. If there's no questions, I would like to first to request as submitted to the clerk.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Next, I'd like to move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
And that is all we have in the Finance Committee, President Ginther.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Miller. Our next committee is the Development Committee. Councilmember Klein chairs that committee. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President Ginther. The first three ordinances tonight involved really what is an unprecedented investment from the City of Columbus and small businesses in the city. There's three ordinances, and we do have speakers for each, but I'd just like to recognize the Department of Development as well as the Small Business Roundtable, my colleagues on council that came together and identified what resources could be put together to make this unprecedented and historic investment in small businesses. Really, it signals the city's commitment to small businesses and the invaluable economic role that they play in our society. We want to make smart ideas turn into businesses and jobs, and these ordinances create a comprehensive package of loans to help small businesses, but at the same time target economically disadvantaged neighborhoods so that they have the opportunity to succeed, that promote their stability and create economic strength. I'd like to invite Mark Barbash, the director of the Finance Fund, to come forward and talk about this initiative that the Finance Fund is partnering with the City of Columbus on. Welcome back to Council Chambers.
Thank you very much, Council President Ginther, Council President Pro Tem Miller, Chairman Klein, City Attorney Pfeiffer, City Auditor Dorian, Director Shoney, et al. We appreciate the opportunity to work with Council, to work with the Development Department on this initiative. A little bit of background about Finance Fund. We have been in existence since for 27 years. Managing range of large and small loan programs focused in on small businesses and community development. And so the opportunity to assist the city and assist the neighborhoods in trying to, as you say, make smart ideas happen. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you. We have a very strong back office, which means that we're going to manage the city resources effectively and prudently.
Thank you, Director Barbash. Any questions or comments for Mr. Barbash while we have him here? Director Shoney, do you have any comments to add?
Thank you, President Ginther, Mr. Chairman. None other than to thank you for your work on this and your leadership on this. We're very excited about this program. We're very excited to partner with the Finance Fund. We think it has the opportunity to bring some much-needed resources to small businesses, in particular with the Interior Improvements Program. We think there's some real opportunity to help some of our Main Street businesses in this program.
I'd also be remiss not to thank the Auditor Dorian and his assistants, and certainly his staff's help. Thank you, Mr. Dorian, for the help that you provided in making these funds available to small businesses so that they can targetly achieve the goals. The first is 2724-2013 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into an agreement with the Finance Fund for the administration of a new small business loan fund initiative by the Columbus City Council to authorize the City Auditor to cancel a purchase order to authorize the appropriation of $523,264 from the Community Development Block Grant Fund, to authorize the expenditure of $1 million from the Community Development Block Grant Fund, and to declare an emergency. We do have one speaker, Bob Lichty. Welcome back to Council, sir. I think you know the drill of identifying your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Bob Lichty. I live at 1330 South 4th Street, and I'm Executive Director of the Parsons Avenue Merchants Association. And Council President Ginther, Council Chair, Committee Chair Klein, everyone, hello. I definitely want to state Pamela's and my personal strong support for this first ordinance on the loan fund with the Finance Fund, but really all four of these ordinances here tonight. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful, powerful increase of our toolkit as we work here to try to redevelop these core neighborhoods and areas like Parsons Avenue. what's really important, and I just want to thank Council's leadership and the Department of Development's leadership on this. Neighborhoods need more than housing. We also need entrepreneurs. We also need vibrant commercial corridors. This is something that's become clear to me over the last couple decades, and I'm really committed to working with it. And I'm thrilled to see you reaching out to an organization like the Finance Fund that is so well respected and does amazing work. And this is a really nice partnership with the city and the neighborhoods. What I like about what's being proposed here tonight is that this builds on our existing assets with a really strong neighborhood commercial revitalization program with the NCR districts, and also the partnerships with the Neighborhood Design Center. We painted 40 storefronts on Parsons last year, but to be able to go back now and do a deeper dive and to really have more resources for both facade improvement and these other things that are coming up, the internal, and that's great, as well as programs with the arts. So anyway, I would just like to say that this is a wonderful addition to our toolkit as we work with entrepreneurs, small businesses, which is just the heart of our economy. And I also wanted to give just a shout out to check out our new website promoting South Columbus. It's allthingssouth.org, and that's where we have a lot of information about resources. And so once we get this updated information about how these new programs are going to work, that'll be on that site too. So, thank you.
Thank you for the support of the ordinance. Any question? Go ahead, Councilmember Paley.
Mr. Lichty, and I know that Mr. Boykin and Trent Smith's going to come up and speak with regards to these ordinances. I just want to thank all three of you and all our other community leaders that have been working together with Council and Councilmember Klein to make these ordinances in these neighborhoods work. If it wasn't for you and all the hard work that you do for all of these neighborhoods, we couldn't do what we do. So a special thank you to all you that have helped us get this done, and keep it up, because we're making it happen here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Paley. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, sir. I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Next is 2739-2013 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a contract with the Finance Fund for the purpose of administering the Facade Improvement Grant Fund, to authorize the appropriation and transfer and expenditure of $250,000 from the General Permanent Improvements Fund, and to declare an emergency. One speaker on this, Mr. Trent Smith. If you could just identify your address, any names or organizations you represent. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Smith.
My name is Trent Smith. My address is 308 West Park Avenue. I'm the Executive Director for the Franklinton Board of Trade, a resident of Franklinton, and also on the Franklinton Area Commission. And I just want to concur with what my friend and colleague Bob Lichty just said. I'm in complete support of these ordinances for the positive impact that they've had on our neighborhoods since they've been available. And we're very appreciative of the fact that not only are we continuing these programs, but we're also expanding what they can do, in particular with the interior improvements. There's a lot of businesses who have gone through some facade renovations in the Franklinton neighborhood who want to do more. And what's great about these programs is that these are not a handout. These require private investment from the business owner themselves. And it shows that they're invested in the neighborhood and willing to stick it out and see the long view of what it really takes to develop a community back to what it was in its heyday. The other thing that these accomplish, as far as these improvements in these, whether it's a facade or interior, there's a direct impact to safety as a result of what we do with these programs. When criminals see the fact that we have new storefronts, a new paint job, a new interior, more customers coming to locations that they previously did not visit, that creates a factor of not wanting to do business in those neighborhoods anymore or on that street anymore. And so it's allowing us to take streets like Broad Street and the other NCR strips and make them safe and inviting once again for people to come and patronize those businesses that have really stuck it out there for quite a long time with some help but not enough. And what you've done here right now is to make that possible for them to continue the improvements, continue their economic development, and allow businesses who have maybe looked at these neighborhoods before and just decided it was not the right time, make them realize that this is the right time and that, you know, what we've got going on is going to happen into the future and beyond. And I also want to just quickly recognize, as Bob did, how great it is to work with the Neighborhood Design Center on all of these programs. They're wonderful to work with, and we've had nothing but good results with all of the businesses that we've worked with so far. And as well, one other kind of side benefit to these programs, these have allowed me to build relationships with other organizations such as Keep Columbus Beautiful, you know, businesses like Lowe's and Home Depot, being able to talk to them about donations for litter pickup and things of that nature because we are an NCR strip. So it's just, there's been nothing but positive about this, and the fact that you're expanding the program is a great boost of confidence for the work that Bob and I and all of our other NCR leaders do. So thank you very, very much for your support and your monetary assistance.
Thank you for the words, and I think it's incumbent upon you and Bob and others that are intimately involved in the economic development of the neighborhoods to let folks know that this exists and just help spread the word, because we have so many terrific programs in the city of Columbus that just aren't targetedly, I don't know why that's my word tonight, but it was even a word, but they need to take advantage of these tools that are in our toolbox, and money will go unspent, money will go unused. So spread the word that they're there and that folks can take advantage of them if they have that smart business idea, and they can work with the finance fund to realize this money and realize their dream, because this is an opportunity where government can step in and bridge the gap to make the level the playing field to create that opportunity, to make someone realize their dream. So, you know, spread the word in Franklinton and Bob and Parsons Avenue and the folks that are listening on TV in their neighborhood, and let someone know, because there's someone out there with an idea that can create jobs and you know, make their dream come true of starting a business, and this money is available for them to make that happen.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think you mentioned the Neighborhood Design Center. I'd be remiss not to recognize Mr. Berthal, who's the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Design Center, who knows something about the NCR areas and has done some great work in the city of Columbus. So thank you for the work that you do as well.
Absolutely.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Smith? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Final piece with the Finance Fund is 2740-2013 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into an agreement with the Finance Fund for the administration of the city's NCR Interior Improvement Grant Fund to amend the 2013 capital improvement budget to authorize the appropriation of $414,000 within the General Permanent Improvement Fund, to authorize the transfer of cash and appropriation between projects within the General Permanent Improvement Fund, to authorize the expenditure of up to $414,000 from the General Permanent Improvement Fund, to authorize the appropriation and expenditure of $211,000 from the Capital South Fund, and to declare an emergency. Any questions or comments? I move for passage.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
2740-2013 passes. Mr. Chairman, could you take us back to consider 2739-2013?
Do I need to move to reconsider it, Council President?
No, sir. Just moved.
Move for passage. Did I forget to do that?
Is there a second? Second. Clerk, call the roll.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
Pass. Thank you, sir.
I just got so excited about the small business opportunities in the city of Columbus that I forgot to pass the ordinance. The final piece of legislation tonight is in development. Oh, it is not the final piece. 2794-2013. I'm going to read the legislation, but really turn it over to Councilmember Paley, because this is Councilmember Paley's idea, and Councilmember Paley deserves all the credit for it. To authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a contract with the Greater Columbus Arts Council to support the Pilot Community Impact Program, to authorize the appropriation and expenditure of $100,000 from the unallocated balance of the cultural services portion of the city's Hotel Motel Tax Fund, and to declare an emergency. We do have a couple speakers, but Councilmember Paley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Klein, and it's working together that make these ordinances happen, but through some collaboration with the Greater Columbus Arts Council, Columbus City Council wishes to fund a pilot grant program that will fund grants supporting art-related economic development in 5 targeted areas of the city. This ordinance will create the Pilot Community Impact Grant Program in Franklinton, the King Lincoln District, Old Town East, South Side, and Wyland Park. The program will be open to all artistic disciplines seeking to implement a new activity or entrepreneurial endeavor supporting the creation or the sale of art. Eligible activities will use art and culture as a catalyst for creating interest in the pilot areas and encouraging people to invest in the delivery and purchase of goods and services from local businesses, galleries, and studios. The Greater Columbus Arts Council will be responsible for the program development, management, grant awards, and the reporting of program results. Thank you, Councilmember Klein, for all your work with regards to putting this legislation together, and to Tom Katzenmeier from the Greater Columbus Arts Council for assisting us with the legislation.
Thank you, Councilmember Paley. Tom Katzenmeier is the President and Executive Director of the Greater Columbus Arts Council. Thank you for coming down to Council Chambers.
Thank you. My name is Tom Katzenmeier. I'm President of the Greater Columbus Arts Council. I live at 448 West Nationwide Boulevard, apartment 401 in the Arena District. Thank you, President Ginther, Councilman Klein, Councilwoman Paley. Just to add to what Councilwoman Paley said, there are, because you've very adequately described the program, there are similar programs that this is modeled after in Austin, Texas, Cincinnati, Minneapolis, and San Diego. We plan to do quite an aggressive outreach effort on it. In fact, pending passage tonight, we'll have a first sort of public forum on it December 12th at noon at our offices in the Chase Building. We're going to do a lot of outreach to community groups. I think it's going to dovetail very nicely with the prior program that just was approved by council. I think there'll be some ideas come out of these neighborhoods that we can do things together. And that's really it. I think we're pretty excited about it. It's a brand new program. This is for new projects. It's not for existing projects. So we hope to launch some new things in those 5 neighborhoods and then build on this through the years. And I even have a thought that we might be able to draw some maybe corporate matching money into it at some point too. So thank you very much for your consideration and your work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Katzenmeier. Any questions or comments? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Our speaker is Mr. Connie Boykin. Welcome back to Council Chambers. You could identify your address and any organizations that you represent.
My name is Connie Boykin, and I live at 1331 East Gate Street, and I am a Southside Commissioner, and I'm also the chairman of the Southside Art and Culture and Entertainment Committee, and that was just established 2 months ago. So I am very happy to see this initiative, because one of the things that I felt the South Side needed was some sort of stimulus to create vibrancy in the South Side. I know that, business is one of your priorities, but I think that art, culture, and entertainment is a motivating factor in keeping things kind of going, And if we can pull together the art community and those creative minds, and if we can start showing them the opportunities that the South Side has that is available to them, then I think that we would have an ongoing, robust project. And I really appreciate what you've done. And Councilwoman Paley, thank you a lot, because I appreciate this. It's a great initiative, and it took courage to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boykin. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Craig?
Mr. Boykin, before you leave, I just wanted to, as others from the South Side has spoken this evening so eloquently about the work, certainly the impact on our small businesses. I know personally I've observed you, not only in terms of this important initiative around the arts, but you are a resident that cares deeply for your community. In fact, I've observed you picking up trash in the morning on many occasions, and going from street to street, working in the community. And that kind of real leadership, you know, and you have been certainly active, and when we were a part of the playground activity, when we constructed the playground on the south side, you were on deck. And so I just wanted to personally acknowledge your work, your long-term commitment to that community, and appreciate all that you're doing, and others.
Thank you, Councilman Craig. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I move for passage.
Second.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Now, this is the final piece in development. 2898-2013, to authorize the Director of Development to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the City of Obetz and the City of Groveport for the purpose of completing the local government innovative grant application and to declare an emergency. Director Shoney.
Thank you, President Ginther. Mr. Chairman, this is authorization for us to apply for state funding to study the potential for putting additional fiber optic resources into the southern part of Franklin County, down into the Rickenbacker corridor. It is one of the holes in our network citywide, both from a business attraction standpoint and a city services standpoint. So this is just simply authorization to put in a joint application and an expression of council's support for that effort.
Okay, thank you, Director. Any questions or comments? I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Moving on to Recreation and Parks. 2637-2013, to authorize the Columbus City Attorney to acquire fee simple title and lesser interests, to contract for professional services, to authorize the expenditure of up to $2,179,206.04 from the Recreation and Parks Fund, for costs relating to the acquisition of parkland property for Rocky Fork, Black Lick Planning Area 4, to authorize the increase of $604,206.04 from a previously established auditor's certificate and to declare an emergency. I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
2741-2013, to authorize the Director of Recreation and Parks to modify a contract with Corda Nemeth Engineering, Inc. for the Camp Chase Rail Trail, to authorize an expenditure of $319,117 from the voted Recreation and Parks Bond Fund and to declare an emergency. Director McKnight, are we getting closer on our Camp Chase project?
Chairman Klein, President Ginther, members of council, yes, we're looking forward to moving forward with this project at this time. Corda Nemeth was retained to do the preliminary engineering for the Camp Chase Railroad, and that's roughly McKinley Avenue to Sullivan Avenue along that rail corridor. That portion is completed. Now we want to go into the final engineering, detailed design for bidding in the spring and begin construction of this project. And this will tie into the work that Metro Parks is doing west of the city on the Camp Chase out towards Big Darby, and again as part of the Ohio Erie Trail. So it'll be an exciting project as we complete it and make some strong connections in our trail system.
Thank you, Director McKnight. I'd like to implicitly recognize many of the folks on the west side that have worked hard on this, and I don't want to start naming names because then I will inevitably leave one off, but the folks that have met with us to push this project forward, it really is a terrific project that will, integrate the entire state of Ohio with the bike trail, and certainly the city of Columbus will play an important role, and it'll be help with the economic development along the west side. Any questions or comments? I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
2773-2013, to authorize the city auditor to transfer $1,164,500 within the voted Recreation and Parks Bond Fund 702 to amend the 2013 capital improvements budget, Ordinance 645-2013, to authorize and direct the Director of Recreation and Parks to enter into a contract with R.W. Sutherland Building Company for the Tuttle Community Center HVAC replacement project, to authorize the expenditure of $1,995,000 and a contingency of $199,500 for a total of $2,194,500 from the voted Recreation and Parks Bond Fund and to declare an emergency. I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
If we may go back to page 5 to first readings under rules and reference. If it's okay with you, President Ginther, we have Building and Zoning Services requesting some fee changes. It's 2635-2013 to adopt the new Building and Zoning Services fee schedule, including fees for the Department of Building and Zoning Services based upon the actual cost related to provide such services, and to be effective Monday, January 6, 2014, and to make necessary code changes in Chapter 4114 License and Registration General Provisions of Title 41, the Columbus Building Code, related to the same. Director Messer, the floor is yours. What's going on here?
Thanks, Councilmember Klein, President Ginther, other members of council. Our current fee schedule dates back to 2008. This year, we took the opportunity to review several clarifications and interpretations that have been documented over the last few years, as well as to evaluate and review our fee schedule in relation to the actual costs incurred by the Department of Building and Zoning Services and other reviewing agencies. As a result, while a few fees were increased slightly, the vast majority of the proposed fee changes and simplifications result in fee decreases for most of our customers. And the overall impact to the changes results in decrease in fees collected by the department. So we're happy to announce that. For example, nearly all of our residential customers altering their residences would pay less for a building permit under the proposed changes than they do now. Our licensed and registered contracts, many of whom are small business owners, will pay nearly 20% less for their annual license and registrations to the department. All of these proposed changes and improvements to the fee schedule were reviewed by various industry groups through outreach from our department, including the BIA, Builders Exchange, City Charter Building Services Review Committee, and all are unanimously in support of the proposed changes and improvements.
Any questions or comments for the director? Okay, I'd like to first move to waive second reading.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
Move for passage.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
And before I conclude, we'd just like to congratulate Director Messer on being the permanent director of the Building and Zoning Services Department. I've had a chance to work with him for a couple years now. I know he's going to be excellent in working with the community and understands the consumer focus, customers focused methodology and the way things need to operate in that department. So I look forward to working with you still, and I know the department's in good hands. Congratulations. That's all.
Thank you, Chairman Klein. Our next committee is the Technology Committee. President Pro Tem Miller chairs that committee. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Ginther. In the Technology Committee tonight, we have 2645, 2013, to authorize the Director of Department of Technology to modify an agreement with Michael Vander Does to provide professional services in support of Columbus Television Renovation Project, to extend the agreement for a one-year term to provide final drawings and client representation and advocacy services, to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Code, to authorize the expenditure of $18,000 from the Department of Technology Information Services Division, and to declare an emergency. In waiving the competitive bidding, the vendor provided designs for upcoming renovation projects which were modified, requiring additional services beyond the original scope. And given the vendor's familiarity with the original design and modification, it's the city's best interest to continue with the same vendor. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
2693, 2013, to authorize the appropriation of $1,678,878.26 from within the Special Income Tax Fund, to authorize the Director of Department of Technology to renew and modify an agreement for the final term of a 3-year agreement with Microsoft Enterprise Software Licensing with SHI International Corporation, utilizing a state term schedule to authorize a modification to the agreement to incorporate additional Microsoft licenses needed to support the Division of Police and other city departments, and to authorize the expenditure of $1,678,878 $878.26, or so much thereof as may be necessary from the Special Income Tax Fund for the Department of Technology, and to declare an emergency. Deputy Director Bodai, could you enlighten us on the waiving the competitive bidding?
Chairman Miller, President Ginther, members of council. This legislation represents the last payment of our 3-year agreement with Software House International for Microsoft Enterprise licensing. This licensing covers all of our desktop software and server and database software throughout the city at the lowest government pricing available. The competitive bidding was completed by the state of Ohio. We piggybacked on their contract a few years ago, and this is the last of that 3-year agreement. It also covered the licensing as well as the software maintenance, and next year we'll be seeking legislative support for the annual maintenance of it with the licensing portion completed. We strongly encourage your support for the passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
And last in the Technology Committee is 2697-2013, to authorize the Director of Department of Technology to renew a modified contract with Software House International for Quest software subscription renewal, to authorize a modification incorporate Quest software subscriptions for 3,000 additional licenses required to support the Police Division technology infrastructure, to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Code, to authorize the expenditure of $43,406.39 from the Department of Technology Information Services Division Internal Services Fund, and to declare an emergency. As SHI is already providing Quest subscriptions, this is actually through an existing contract that was actually awarded through a competitive bidding process. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
And that is all we have in the Technology Committee, President Ginther.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Miller. Our next committee is the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Councilmember Mills chairs that committee. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Ginther. Tonight in Public Safety and Judiciary have the following ordinances. Begin with Ordinance 2605-2013. To accept the Memorandum of Understanding and Intergovernmental Agreement executed between representatives of the City of Columbus and Franklin County Board of Commissioners in accordance with provisions of the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act Fiscal Year 2004, prior to receiving the Fiscal Year 2011 Law Enforcement State Homeland Security Grant Program Sub-Grant Award for the Division of Police, and to declare an emergency. The Division of Police has received the final project approval for fiscal year 2011 through the Homeland Security Grant Program and the funds. Examples of things that will be purchased with these funds include utility vehicles, radios, or crowd control barricade trailers, computers, and a 800 megahertz radio base station. The Franklin County Office of Homeland Security and Justice Programs will be responsible for the administration of this project under the Law Enforcement State Homeland Security Grant Program from the federal government through the state of Ohio. Upon receiving and accepting the equipment, our Division of Police will forward all invoices to the county. This agreement begins October 15, 2013, and terminates March 31st, 2014, unless extended by mutual agreement of the parties. If there are no other comments or questions, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Next, I have ordinance 2646 to authorize the administrative and presiding judge of the Franklin County Municipal Court to enter into contract with Chris for language interpreter services for the Franklin County Municipal Court, to authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $25,000 from the general fund, and to declare an emergency. If there are no comments or questions, I move for passage.
Craig Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley, President Ginther.
Next, I have ordinance 2663 to authorize and direct the city attorney to settle the lawsuit of Tremaine Nelms et al. Versus City of Columbus et al., currently pending in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio Eastern Division, to authorize a transfer and expenditure of $35,000 within the Division of Police's general fund budget, and to declare an emergency. I asked the city attorney to provide a briefing to this council as he has provided to my office related to this settlement. City Attorney Pfeiffer.
Chairman Mills, President Ginther, members of council, thank you. This incident out of which this lawsuit arose was April of 2007. We litigated this, and we got summary judgment in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, but upon appeal, the plaintiff prevailed, and the summary judgment was overruled by the Sixth Circuit. The case then went back to a different judge. What happened here was the police officers were called to an apartment complex, which is just behind Sam's Club up on Morse Road. The officer was called because he heard the reports of destruction of property. When he got there, people said there was a fight, somebody's been injured. And the officer, believing that somebody might have been hurt, tried to figure out where that person might be. It was suggested he was inside an apartment in this apartment complex. Now, the owners of the apartment are there and our police officers there. Without a search warrant, but believing he had reason to go in to find this person, the officer went into this apartment. He did find the person he was looking for hiding in the shower fully clothed. When we looked at this case, we thought we had a pretty good case, but the Sixth Circuit obviously disagreed. So the judge who took the case then mediated it and believed very strongly this case should settle. You listen very carefully to a federal district court judge when they indicate that to you. As a result of this, the city's portion of a settlement is $35,000. The apartment complex, however, will be paying $65,000 to the plaintiff. Based upon the circumstances, we feel this is a reasonable resolution of this old case, and we'd ask council to approve this ordinance so we can pay this amount.
Thank you, Attorney Pfeiffer. I appreciate the briefing. I'll offer for any comments or questions from council. If there are none, I move for passage.
Craig Klein Miller, Mills Paley, President Ginther.
I wanted to make one announcement before I turn the floor over to Councilmember Klein. I just wanted to remind the listening and viewing audience that I will hold a hearing on the livery code changes being proposed in council chambers at 5 o'clock here in council, and I'll be accepting speaker slips. That will be this Wednesday on livery code changes. Councilmember Klein.
Thank you, Chair Mills. On page 11 of the agenda that the council president removed from the consent agenda, 2531-2013, to authorize the municipal court clerk to modify and increase the contract with Huntington National Bank for bank and credit card services for the municipal court clerk's office to authorize the expenditure of $11,000 from the general fund and declare an emergency. Any questions or comments? I'd like to first amend to 30 days by voice vote.
Craig.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
Waive second reading the same.
Second.
Craig.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
And move for passage the same.
Second.
Craig.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
The floor is yours, Councilmember Mills. Chairperson Mills.
Thank you, Councilmember Klein. That's all I have in public safety and judiciary.
Thank you, Councilmember Mills. Our next committee is the Public Service and Transportation Committee. Councilmember Paley chairs that committee. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Ginther. In Public Service and Transportation this evening, I have Ordinance 2594-213 to authorize the Director of Public Service to establish a purchase order with the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio for landfill use by the Division of Planning and Operations, and to authorize the expenditure of $50,000 or so much as may be needed for the street construction, maintenance, and repair fund, to waive the competitive bidding requirements of the Columbus City Code 1959 and to declare an emergency. I would first, if there are no comments from council, move to amend to 30 days.
Second.
Craig.
By voice.
Craig.
Yes.
Klein. Miller. Mills. Paley.
Yes.
President Ginther.
And I'd like to move to waive second reading by voice vote.
Craig. Klein. Miller. Mills. Paley.
Yes.
President Ginther.
And move for passage by voice vote.
Craig, Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley.
Yes.
President Ginther.
That's all we have on public service and transportation. May I move on to public utilities? On public utilities, we have ordinance 2511, 2013, to authorize the Director of Public Utilities to execute a construction contract with Kenmore Construction Company for the Dublin Road Water Treatment Plant Capacity Increase Residuals Force Main Project for the Division of Water, and to authorize the transfer and expenditure of $8,423,992.40 within the Water Works Enlargement Voted Bond Fund and the Water Permanent Improvements Fund, to amend the 2013 capital improvement budget and to declare an emergency. If there are no questions or comments, I move for passage.
Craig, Klein, Miller, Mills, Paley. President Ginther.
That's all I have in utilities this evening, President Ginther.
Thank you, Councilmember Paley. Our next committee is the Rules and Reference Committee. I chair that committee. First in the committee this evening is consideration of petition-initiated ordinance 2798-2013 to enact the ordinance proposed by initiative petition entitled Columbus Fair Campaigns Code to enact Chapter 107 of the Columbus City Codes, 1959, to provide for a voluntary system of campaign finance reform for elections to the office of mayor and member of council by creating voluntary limits on campaign contributions and expenditures. So I'll just give a brief synopsis of the process, and we will hear some public testimony and then discussion of the ordinance with the city auditor, the city attorney, and members of the administration. Petitions were submitted to the clerk, Clerk Blevins, on November 7th, 2013. The clerk has determined the sufficiency of the signatures. Per the charter, the clerk assigned the petition-initiated ordinance an ordinance number and assigned it to the Rules and Reference Committee on November 18th, 2013. Per the charter, council is required to consider the ordinance at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is today, December 2nd. Council has the option to accept, reject, or take no action. If council takes no action or rejects the ordinance goes to the ballot. First, I'd like to call up speakers. I think we have 3 speakers in support of the ordinance and 3 speakers opposed. Our first speaker in support of the ordinance is Mr. Willis Brown. Mr. Brown, if you'd share your name, address, any organizations you represent, and sir, you have 3 minutes to speak to the ordinance.
Yes, Willis Brown, President of the Bronzeville Neighborhood Association. And I am asking that council supports this for several reasons. One, that the people are asking that we have over 23,000 signatures saying that we do want campaign finance reform. It costs over $100,000 this past election to maintain these seats. We're saying that we need something different. And the reason why we want this to happen is that council always like to say that you represent all of us. But with the school board levy, that wasn't the case. All 7 of y'all went ahead with the mayor. The vote was 70% against it, 30% for it. But where was your representation of the 70% that voted it down? So it's clear you don't represent us. And I'm saying from this point of it, it's always going to be a crawl that you don't represent us, but yet you say you do. We're asking you to do something good. We heard here tonight all the good things that you do. Yes, administratively, you do a lot of nice and great things. But when do you listen to the people? You say you do. Yes, on those things. What about this? What about the school board? That was just a blatant disrespect of the people. And it goes back to the campaign reform. We also asked for redistricting so we can have true representation. $100,000 per seat to stay here. This is what we pay for, but yet we get negated, disregarded when we come up for certain things. So we're asking that you have to at least support this, and let's have discussion. Let's change the way that we can get other people into the seats. District representation, it costs $100,000 to run. Why do we have to continue to do it at that large amount of money? So we're asking that you tie into supporting this, because in the past, we now have another issue with the Vets Memorial. Again, the people are saying, the vets are saying, let's keep it. And here we go again where this is going to happen. We saw it happen with Poindexter. And not one of your council members, with all the stuff that we've been bringing to council, no one stood up for the people. But yet you say you represent us. But this is what happens with at-large representation, and also when you're all appointed, and also when we have all Democrats. We're the Republicans. We're the independents. What Columbus? This doesn't represent Columbus. Do something here and support this so we can begin dialogue for a positive change, so we can have a better council. Y'all are okay, but you're not the best. Because most of y'all, you don't do what we ask. We've lost more things. Yes, you do some nice things. But we have to have district representation. This at-large stuff is a farce. The only city of this size in the country that has this system of at-large representation. And this is why you can get what you want done, but we suffer as the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any questions or comments from council members for Mr. Brown? Our next speaker in support of the ordinance is Mr. John Beard. Mr. Beard, welcome to council chambers. If you'd come forward to the podium, share your name, address, any organizations you represent. Sir, you have 3 minutes to speak in support of the ordinance.
Thank you, Council President Ginther, members of council. My name is John Beard, 1815 Franklin Park South. I'm going to read something short from the city charter, so bear with me. It says, nothing in this charter, directly or through incorporation of state election laws, shall prevent the city from adopting ordinances, enforcing requirements, or setting limits on campaign finances or monetary contributions relating to elections for city offices. That was a 1994 amendment to the city charter that 63% of the Columbus electorate voted in support of, because they recognized 19 years ago it was important to get control of these elections. In the 19 years since, council has not adapted the type of comprehensive reform that people look for. I'm here in support of the Fair Campaigns Code. I'm not going to go into details on it, but kind of talk at some broader issues about the types of things we need to do to have more fair and more competitive elections. As Americans, we believe that competition brings out the best in us, and that happens everywhere except in our political lives, where politicians try to make elections more non-competitive, less fair, try to preserve and protect seats, and they do it regardless of party, regardless of level of government, with the gerrymandering, with this, the cost of the elections, whatever the case may be. But that's what you do, and that's as un-American as you can expect. We're a nation that thinks competition is good. The wisdom of our national constitution and our local charter is that the people can amend it. The people ultimately have the power. And, since 19 years have gone by and nothing's happened from downtown, we have presented this to you to consider. And obviously, if you don't, we'll take it to the ballot. It will go to the ballot. We would like your help, though. Our democracy remains a work in progress. If you look across the country right now, there are, got a number here, in the first 10 months of this year, there have been 90 bills introduced in 33 states to restrict voting. But on the other hand, there have been 234 bills in 45 states to expand voting rights. So let's be clear. Why is that? Martin Luther King said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The people are marching to justice. We want our elected officials to march there with us. Our position is simple. The status quo is intolerable, and we're in pursuit of fair and competitive elections. We want you to join with us. We want you to join with us in solving the sweeping trends that citizens have about the responsiveness of their government, about the conduct of elections. Help us with that. You can do that, or we'll go to the ballot, obviously. Denise Benning, who's one of the 5 original petitioners in this effort, said, John, we need to make this national, make this a part of the national dialogue. And She took the liberty of applying to the Al Sharpton had a Rejected Stones contest for community activism. This was a grand prize winner. If you listen to Radio 1, you've probably heard her on that show. So we know we're in the right type of place. We want you guys to be on the right side of history with us. We don't want to leave you behind in the dustbins of history.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. Any questions or comments for Mr. Beard? Our final speaker in opposition, or I'm sorry, in support of 2798-2013 is Robert Fitrakis. Mr. Fitrakis, if you'd come forward to the podium, share your name, address, any organizations you represent. And sir, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Council President, Council people. What's going on in the country we know is much broader issues of the private interest of money increasingly influencing systems. So that's why it's much easier to begin in this environment to talk about matching funds and voluntary limits. Remember, these are voluntary and no one has to accept these limits. A recent study indicates 37% of all elected offices in the U.S. are one party. Right? We live here in the state of Ohio. We're aware of this. For example, the president in the last election got a majority of votes in Ohio. Yet instead of 8-8 in terms of Congress, we have 12 Republicans in gerrymandered districts and 4 Democrats. That's the process we're looking at. When 1% of the population gives more than 90% of the money, it tends to buy access and influence public policies. The more individuals we have coming forward with a variety of new ideas, and I belong to a party, the Green Party, that's been thrown off the ballot as part of the John Kasich Re-election Protection Act, is that every single minor party has been thrown off the ballot in Ohio at a time when we need new ideas, at a time when we need to be able to raise money to at least have a public dialogue and debate. This is positive. It's voluntary. Those will say, we don't need public money. On the other hand, this is tax casino money, which you have deemed not to be public. So we're going to use these so-called sin taxes to pay for real democracy. And that's what we really need to do in Columbus, Ohio. It's not going to cost public money. And it's going to save us money because we won't have to give away $250 million in casino taxes to 4 of the richest families in this city. There'll be a variety of debate going on. There'll be a variety of new ideas. And I urge you in this circumstance to come forward and allow this to go forward. It will only add to the marketplace of ideas and make this a much better city. And it's really not motivated by the fact that I've run for council and can't raise any money. I'm not real sure that with my party not around anymore, we won't have access to that money anyway. So I'm urging you to pass this. It's historic. It shows a commitment to clean government. It shows a commitment to diversity. So I urge you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitrakis. Any questions or comments for Mr. Fitrakis? Thank you, sir, for coming down tonight and sharing your thoughts on the ordinance. We do have 3 speakers in opposition to the proposed ordinance. The first speaker is Chris Hadesy. Mr. Hadesy, welcome to council chambers. If you would come forward to the podium, share your name, address, any organizations you represent. Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Council President Ginther, members of the council, my name is Chris Hadesy, and I live at 223 Wilbur Avenue in the Short North. I own a family business, Hadesy Automotive, located at 3895 West Broad Street in Columbus. Many of you also know me from the time when I first worked with Council President Ginther, Mayor Coleman, West Side neighborhoods, and business leaders to bring the Hollywood Casino to the West Broad and Georgesville corridor. We fought hard during the effort because we believed the casino would bring good-paying jobs and would jumpstart redevelopment and revitalization of the West Side, and we were right. This $400 million investment was the spark needed to begin the transformation from vacancy to vibrancy. Empty storefronts have new tenants. Businesses that were able to weather the storm are expanding. 22 property owners donating their property to ODOT so the West Broad Street would get a complete makeover and be a boulevard which all Central Ohio should be proud of. We are now working with all stakeholders to develop the Wilson Road Bike Hub and urban campground so that Columbus and this district will become and recognized as the bike capital of the nation. And last but not least, the City of Columbus has seen a revenue stream from the casino that benefits all of Columbus by going into the general fund to help pay for priorities such as police, firefighters, code enforcement, and street and sidewalk improvements. So you can imagine my surprise and dismay when I learned that the initiative petition slated for the May ballot called for use of the casino revenues to pay for politicians' campaigns. There were countless neighborhood meetings held during the casino campaign, during the planning phase, and ongoing after the casino opened, and I can assure you that at no time did any citizen or small business owner indicate the casino revenue funds sent to the city should go to fund political campaigns. It is most troubling in my mind because it uses citizen tax dollars for politics instead of investment into neighborhoods. There are far too many other priorities for every neighborhood in Columbus. I would add that our city is evidenced by our bond rating and by the national and international recognition we continue to receive is one of the best run cities and of course the best city in which to work, live, and raise a family. This is a result of strong leadership and stewardship by our mayor and city council. I would propose that the system is working, no fixes needed, and that our city electorate continues to get it right. I stand here today opposed to this initiative, and I ask this council to do the same. This initiative should be defeated both tonight and at the ballot in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadesy. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hadesy? Thank you, sir, for coming down tonight and sharing your thoughts on the proposed ordinance. Our second speaker in opposition this evening is Lucy Wolf. Ms. Wolf, welcome to council chambers. If you would share your name, address, any organizations you represent, and you have 3 minutes to speak to the ordinance.
Good evening, President Ginther and members of council. My name is Lucy Wolf. I reside at 4105 Hanover Square Drive. I come to you tonight as a resident and community leader to address the issue of the petition for the Columbus Fair Campaigns Code. The petition proposes taking $300,000 from casino tax revenue and using money towards campaign funds for the mayor and council candidates. Our tax dollars were raised to restore the budgets of the basic city services of police, fire, and code enforcement that help our area neighborhoods. In my commission area of Livingston Avenue, crime, blighted houses, and negligent property owners are a daily occurrence. Our neighborhood needs police services to fight crime, firefighters to keep the arson in control, and code enforcement to make sure vacant houses are secure. A cut to these budgets would make a difficult job even worse. A city that invests in its neighborhoods is a city where people want to come and live their lives in peaceful enjoyment. When politics threaten the stability of the neighborhoods, we will have disgruntled residents and taxpayers. In my humble voter opinion, a candidate that works hard to raise campaign funds, his or herself, is a more attractive candidate than a candidate who is willing to take public money from the areas of need for personal gain. I commend the mayor and city council for their leadership in restoring the many programs impacted by budget challenges and hope that we can continue to live and work together in this great city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any questions or comments for Ms. Wolf this evening? Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts on the proposed ordinance. Our final speaker on this ordinance is Mr. Michael Johnson. Mr. Johnson, welcome to council chambers. If you'd come forward to the podium, share your name, address, any organizations you represent.
Yes, sir.
Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Michael Johnson, and my address is 3050 East 6th Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43219. I am the president of the East Columbus Civic Association, and our area is right around the Cassidy and 5th Avenue area. We represent about 4,300 people in that corridor. Our meetings are the third Thursday of every month, and I encourage those to come that would like to see the product of our community. I stand before you today because I want to send a message that taxpayer money should not be spent on political campaigns, period. I think that in light of some of the comments I heard earlier, I'm looking at my time slide, I want to revise my comments a little bit and help folks remember the great things that the City of Columbus does. There is no room for negativity, accusations, and political cartoons that are nasty and mean-spirited. We have to come together and continue to come together as a city. And using myself and my community as an example, I'd like to point out that the police department, for instance, in our community, has a strong presence, and we've seen a decline in crime in our area consistently over the last several years. I want to point out that the fire department, Station 20, has done an excellent job in our community. And they told me at my last Civic Association meeting how they are having a decline in runs with regard to issues that would require a lot of things that would take up their time because our community is working. I want to also point out that we've got clean roads. We've got alleyways that are being worked on because of the resources that the city has put in our area. But there's more. We have an excellent relationship with the Recreation and Parks Department from the City of Columbus. Our William Adams Community Center has never been better, and with the things that are happening, we're looking to have a much better and vibrant schedule in the next year and the years ahead. We have a brand new playground that worked in conjunction with the Columbus Blue Jackets in the City of Columbus, and we have more kids playing in our community than we ever have before thanks to that initiative. We have a vibrant and growing youth baseball program with over 300 kids and more on the way in the next year, in part funded by a grant, the Youth First grant that we got from the City of Columbus. But there's more. The City of Columbus and the grants that we've also received include from the Coalition for a Nonviolent Columbus. This is a committee that was put together in part by the city and community leaders in the city with funds that go to help fight crime in our areas and our neighborhood. And I'm a proud recipient of that, of one of those grants. Also, we have, thanks to the city, a community garden grant and other types of in-kind services that help folks in our community learn about vegetables, learn about gardening, things that the city sees as important, and so do we. As I'm moving along quickly, I just want to say that it's important that our partnership with the city stay as it is. We have a growing relationship with the East Columbus Elementary School and Dr. Good, who's come out and spent time in the communities to make things better for our residents, and we are responding. Collaborations with businesses is great, and that's what we do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments for Mr. Johnson? Thank you for coming down this evening and sharing your thoughts on the proposed ordinance. Generally speaking, when council considers an ordinance, we have had an opportunity to hear from or have the city auditor, the city attorney, and the administration weigh in on proposed ordinances. And so we want to give that opportunity to the city attorney first, then we'll go to the city auditor, and then Director Rakowski, on behalf of the mayor, will offer their thoughts and feedback. City Attorney Pfeiffer.
President Ginther, member of council, you've asked my office to look at two issues basically here. One, in assisting the clerk in determining the sufficiency of the initiative petition, and the next to do an analysis of the proposed legislation. This is not to be taken lightly, and accordingly, let me read to you what our memorandum states relative to these two issues, if I may. The first deals with the legal review of initiative petition sufficiency. In reviewing the initiative petition that was submitted to the city clerk on November 7, 2013, I first note that the petitioners have referenced specific provisions of the Ohio Revised Code, as well as sections 41 through 47 of the Columbus City Charter. 3 of the revised code provisions they reference are wholly inapplicable to municipal initiative petitions. Most notably, it appears that the petitioners have erroneously relied on Ohio Revised Code section 351905 for the form of their petition. However, that section deals only with statewide initiative petitions. Reference on the wrong statute has resulted in 2 significant defects in this petition. First, the petition contains a summary prepared by the petitioners. Neither the city charter nor the provisions of the revised code that are applicable to municipal initiative petitions require or authorize any summary to be included in the petition. Moreover, even if the statewide initiative statute was applicable here, under that provision, every summary included in the petition is required to be certified by the Attorney General as a fair and truthful statement of the proposed law prior to circulation of the petition for signatures. The summary in the petition that was submitted to the city clerk was not reviewed and certified by the Attorney General or by any other office. And even assuming both that the addition of any summary to this petition is permissible and that no prior certification is necessary, I do not believe petitioner's summary could be considered a fair and truthful summary. For instance, the summary begins by stating that campaign finance reform was never enacted by City Council and that the ordinance would complete a 1994 charter amendment. This is background information that does not in any way summarize the substance of the legislation. But more importantly, it is a fact that in 2003, City Council enacted legislation that required campaign finance disclosures above and beyond those required by state law. Thus, regardless of whether one considers that 2003 legislation to be sufficient, it is simply factually incorrect to state that campaign finance reform has never been enacted by City Council. The summary also identifies a specific amount and funding source for the proposed public funding of campaigns, namely $300,000 in casino tax revenues. However, the city charter requires that the appropriation and expenditure of city funds is subject to the annual budget enacted by City Council, and Council's discretion on the annual budget cannot be ordained in a prior ordinance. In sum, the language of an initiative petition must avoid misleading electors. Thus, even if including any summary on this petition is not a per se fatal defect, that summary cannot be misleading. In addition to the unauthorized summary, the second significant defect in the petition is its non-compliance with Revised Code Section 731.33, which requires that specific notice be printed in red at the top of each part petition. Again, having apparently relied on an inapplicable Revised Code section, the petitioners submitted part petitions to the city clerk that contains language that is nearly the same, but is not printed in red as required. It is true that provisions for municipal initiative and referendum are liberally construed so as to permit rather than preclude the exercise of this power. Nevertheless, the settled rule is that election laws are mandatory and require strict compliance, and that substantial compliance is acceptable only when an election provision expressly states that it is. The courts have applied these legal principles to uphold the invalidation of petitions for noncompliance with such requirements as providing the necessary signatures on the pre-circulation initiative petition, filing a certified copy of the petition with the city auditor, omitting the title and/or text of a proposed ordinance, and defective election falsification language that was also not in boldface or capital letters as required. Finally, as to the face of the petition, I note that it contains 2 different titles for the proposed ordinance. The title in the front of the petition preceding the summary differs from the title at the back of the petition preceding the proposed text. In reviewing the circulator information attached to the part petitions, I also note the following defects. The circulator declaration erroneously refers to a recall petition rather than an initiative petition. The circulator affidavit erroneously refers to Section 49 of the City Charter, which deals with referendum rather than Section 42. And the circulator affidavit incorporates required information by reference rather than directly, and equivocates as to whether it is sworn based on the affiant's personal knowledge by using the language to the best of the circulator's knowledge, information, observation, and belief. In accordance with Section 43 of the City Charter and Section 731.28 of the Ohio Revised Code, the city clerk must exercise her limited discretionary authority to determine the sufficiency and validity of initiative petitions when she receives the petitions back from the Board of Elections with the number of verified signatures. The clerk may not inquire into questions not evident on the face of the petition or conduct a judicial or quasi-judicial proceeding. The clerk's limited discretionary authority is thus more restricted than that of the Board of Elections, and the Board retains its full authority to independently determine the validity and sufficiency of the petitions. That authority includes the requirement to conduct a quasi-judicial proceeding in the event of a protest being filed with the Board. The potentially defective defects in the petition submitted to the clerk that I have identified do not involve interpretation of the city charter requirements, but rather are preliminary matters of state election laws on which there is no established case law directly on point, and therefore require an interpretation of that law. Additionally, resolution of at least one of those issues may benefit from or require the opportunity for presentation of evidence in a quasi-judicial proceeding which the clerk is not permitted to conduct. Accordingly, I have advised the city clerk that, given her limited discretionary authority here, the Board of Elections is the body best suited to determine whether those deficiencies are fatal to the petition. In short, the limited discretion of the clerk is to refer the petition, if this council rejects it, to the Board of Elections. Now, the second aspect that you asked our office and me to examine was a legal review of the ordinance proposed by initiative petition. So let me begin on that. Political speech is at the core of what the First Amendment protects. Campaign finance laws seek to directly regulate that speech. There is therefore an inherent conflict between the core of the First Amendment and campaign finance laws, which has resulted in a significant amount of litigation and great difficulty in navigating a safe path through those various court decisions. Although previous Supreme Courts liberally applied judicial scrutiny to permit some campaign finance provisions, the current court reads the First Amendment more rigidly, and in several notable decisions since 2008, has struck down various campaign finance measures. Those decisions must be taken into account when assessing any proposal in this complex area of the law, since they not only reflect a shift in elections law jurisprudence, but also serve as a reminder that evolving case law frequently requires that enacted laws be amended, repealed, or supplemented by legislative bodies in response to those court decisions. Laws that burden political speech are subject to strict scrutiny, which requires the government to prove that the restrictions further a compelling interest and is narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. Preventing corruption or the appearance of corruption are the only legitimate and compelling government interests thus far identified for restricting campaign finances. Laws aimed at leveling the playing field, equalizing the candidate's resources, or alleviating potentially corruptive influences of large campaign contributions have been invalidated as violations of the First Amendment. Thus, to the extent the proposed ordinance here relies on purported interests such as protecting the election process from potential undue influence, promoting public confidence, or preserving confidence in government, those reasons will not support all the restrictions the ordinance contains. I also would remind this council that Section 45 of the City Charter states that ordinances approved by electoral vote shall not be repealed, amended, or supplemented except by an electoral vote. This means that should this ordinance be approved by the voters, there is nothing council can do to fix any defects in the ordinance, constitutional or otherwise. That charter provision will prevail over anything in the ordinance to the contrary, including the provision that attempts to reserve the ability of council to make subsequent changes in the ordinance under certain conditions. That is, the ordinance cannot circumvent the charter by authorizing city council to exercise authority that conflicts with the charter. The proposed ordinance contains increased contributions and expenditure disclosures, restrictions on contributions and expenditures, and public funding of city council and mayoral campaigns. Addressing the proposed disclosure provisions first, generally speaking, disclosure provisions are subject to a less rigorous standard. Most importantly, disclosure is the only provision thus far identified that the government may justify with an interest other than anti-corruption. It is therefore reasonable to conclude that the disclosure requirements in the proposed ordinance would likely survive legal challenge. As to the proposed constitution and expenditure restrictions, again speaking very generally, contribution limits have been determined to involve little direct restraint on political communication, for they prevent the symbolic expression of support evidenced by a contribution, but do not infringe the contributor's freedom to discuss candidates and issues. Expenditure limitations, on the other hand, have been found to place substantial and direct restrictions on the ability of candidates, citizens, and associations to engage in protected political expression in violation of the First Amendment. The most legally troubling component of the proposed ordinance is the proposed public funding provisions. While governments may engage in public financing of election campaigns, the goal of creating a viable public financing scheme can only be pursued in a manner consistent with the First Amendment. A candidate's decision to participate in public funding must be voluntary. If candidates are coerced to participate or effectively punished for not participating, the scheme will not be upheld. In the proposed ordinance, the public funding scheme is premised on a contract between a candidate for mayor or city council and the city, in which the candidate would voluntarily agree to abide by limitations on contributions and expenditures in exchange for public funding and other benefits. I would first note that simply calling something a contract does not make it so. The candidates are not providing any goods or services to the city, so this is more like a grant agreement than a contract. I also note, as touched upon in relation to the petition summary, that the provision in the proposed ordinance identifying the public funds that may be used is subject to the charter provisions dealing with the budget process. And no ordinance can circumvent that process or limit council and the mayor's discretion in establishing that annual budget, notwithstanding the language in the proposed ordinance requiring specific funds to be included in any financing plan. The primary legal concern I have with the proposed ordinance is that the public funding provisions are not limited to providing public funding to candidates who voluntarily enter into the agreement. Rather, those candidates who, consistent with their rights under the First Amendment, choose not to seek public funding and the restrictions that come with it are effectively punished for not doing so. Subject to a $500 fine, they are required to state on all political advertising that this campaign has not agreed to comply with the contribution and expenditure limits of the Columbus Fair Campaign Code. There is also a requirement that this language be included on the ballot under the candidate's name. This requirement would be prohibited by the city charter, which sets forth the ballot contents for citywide races. This defect is not cured by the inclusion of a provision requiring council submission of a charter amendment to allow this ballot language, since the submission of proposed charter amendments is within the legislative discretion of the council under the charter and as such cannot be mandated by prior ordinance. The proposed ordinance also provides that candidates who choose to sign a contract must participate in a series of 4 debates televised on the Columbus Government Television Station. It also provides those candidates with a significant amount of broadcast time on that station. These are substantial benefits that are not provided to other candidates. Moreover, the proposed ordinance provides that a candidate who signs the contract need not comply with the voluntary contribution and expenditure limits and may continue to use on campaign advertisement the statement of compliance with the Columbus Fair Campaign Code if, for instance, any other candidate for the same office has not signed a contract, or if independent expenditures on a race, which by definition are not within the control of any candidate, exceed $10,000 at any time before the election. These are significant exceptions and allow a candidate to continue to receive all the public funds and benefits without any limitations. Collectively, the required disclosure on all advertising that a candidate has not agreed to comply with the contribution and expenditure limits to the Columbus Fair Campaign Code, and the exclusion of those candidates from the televised debates, and from the significant access to free television broadcast time would, in my opinion, substantially burden the non-participating candidates' First Amendment rights without the justification or narrowly tailoring necessary to withstand judicial scrutiny. It is therefore my opinion that the public funding component of the proposed ordinance would be found to be unconstitutional if challenged in court. And as with all federal civil rights lawsuits, should any party prevail in such a lawsuit challenge the constitutionality of all or part of the proposed ordinance, the city would be responsible for paying that party's attorney's fees. For these reasons, I believe that this council approved the proposed ordinance. For these reasons, I believe that should this council approve the proposed ordinances drafted by the petitioners, it would be enacting an unconstitutional ordinance, which would be a financial liability to the city.
Thank you, City Attorney Pfeiffer. Any comments or questions for the City Attorney before we ask the City Auditor and the Finance Director to weigh in? Thank you, City Attorney Pfeiffer. City Auditor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. President, and all council members. I'm going to offer a few comments purely in the financial arena. I certainly appreciate all of Mr. Pfeiffer's comments, and they certainly will guide us through this effort as they have for the past many years. When we think purely financial results of this particular ordinance, if it became a part of the city charter, it would certainly be unique because it would become a permanent commitment of funds. Every disbursement of funds in my career has been subject to the appropriations of the predecessor of yours at these council seats, your own council today, and will be subject to approval of successor councils, as opposed to any permanent commitment of monies out of your city charter. There's been a lot of discussion about casino taxes. Let me comment on that. The residue of casino taxes flows directly into the city's general fund. As an example, this year, 2013, approximately $5.5 million of casino taxes went into the general fund. Next year, I anticipate about $6 million. I want to get back to this idea of casino taxes. Never in my memory, and one who has worked on this project for a long, long time, do I ever remember casino taxes being referred to as not being public funds. During the various deliberations and the ordinances that this council has passed, and many of us, including myself, have urged and approved, various commitments were made subject to appropriations by this council. Each of those commitments has a termination date to it. They're not permanent. Let me give you an example. We pledged $2.5 million to the West Side Community Fund for improvements on the west side of Columbus, approaching the casino area. That commitment, subject to your appropriations, will be fulfilled in the year 2015. At that point in time, the remaining portion of that commitment will flow into the city's general fund. You also authorized the issuance of about $15 million of city bonds for improved infrastructure, land remediation, things of that nature in conjunction with the casino. Those bonds will be paid off in the year 2032, another termination date. Once that takes place, those monies will flow into the city's general fund. There's been discussion about the arena, and much debated, much discussed, and certainly a result that I supported and encouraged. Those monies are paid to the Franklin County Convention Facility Authority, and that also, those payments have a termination date. That agreement today calls for the termination to be around the year 2039. I say around because if money comes in more rapidly, it would be shorter than that. If money comes in more slowly, it would take a few additional years to conclude that. My point is that all these commitments have termination dates to them. Any residue of casino tax money flows into your general fund. So any attempt to divert any portion of casino tax revenues simply means less money for your general fund. I also, and I've read every word of the proposal, I send my condolences to the city clerk when I think of the additional duties that would be placed on the city clerk, and I can certainly foresee a need for increased staff in those regards. But the major concern I think you have to think about is this permanent commitment of public funds. into ad infinitum, I guess, until the electorate would choose to change it. So my concerns are of a financial nature, and they are very, very clearly unique and very much different than the commitments that you have today and into the future for casino taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor Dorian. Any questions for the auditor before we ask Director Rakowski for comments on behalf of the Coleman administration? Thank you, Auditor. Director Rakowski.
Thank you, President Ginther and members of council. I'll speak briefly here and build a little bit on the comments made by the auditor, since he spoke so eloquently about some of the same concerns that the administration and myself as your finance and management director have with some of the provisions of this ordinance. Though it's difficult to place an exact figure on many of the items that are in this ordinance, because it's fairly ambiguous in regard to some of these indirect costs that the auditor spoke to in regard to the clerk's office and some other pieces of this. I do believe that there's a significant cost associated with the bureaucracy that would be needed we would need to implement for this ordinance. The litigation that I'm quite sure is certainly associated with the passage and implementation of this ordinance, and the public funding, as others have spoke to tonight, of political campaigns with general fund resources. And I want to reiterate what the auditor said. This is clearly, these are clearly general fund resources that we rely on, and we rely on even more heavily now to replace funds that have been cut from the state in regard to our revenue sharing with the state and the estate tax and the loss of those revenues as well. All of this diverts permanently, as the auditor has already said, resources away from neighborhood services such as police and fire, public health, code enforcement, and our recreation centers and pools, and many, many other services that we provide to the residents of this community. The administration has concerns, and I personally have concerns with anything that diverts general fund monies from core city services and job creation and retention efforts here at the city that grow our income tax and keep our city's finances sound. I also want to reiterate a point that was brought up by the city attorney. Let's be clear that in 2003 there was meaningful campaign finance reform that was passed by this council. And unlike what is before council tonight, it brought transparency to the financing of campaigns. And more importantly, it was legal, and it did not take money out of the city's general fund and away from the provision of services in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Director Rakowski. Any questions or comments from council members? What I have heard very clearly from the city attorney and city auditor and the finance director, some pretty grave concerns about the proposed ordinance, feeling that it is unnecessary, unconstitutional, and diverts tax dollars from neighborhoods to fund political campaigns. All that being heard, and with all the consideration and analysis provided to us this evening, I would move for passage and request a no vote. Is there a second? Second. Clerk, call the roll. By voice.
Craig.
No.
Klein. No. Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
No. Next, for consideration for council is 2921-2013. The title of the ordinance is to order and provide for the submission to the electors at the next ensuing election of ordinance number 2798-2013, which enacts an ordinance proposed by initiative petition entitled Columbus Fair Campaigns Code to enact Chapter 107 of the Columbus City Codes, 1959, to provide for a voluntary system of campaign finance reform for election to the office of mayor and member of council by creating voluntary limits on campaign contributions and expenditures, and to declare an emergency. Council rejected Ordinance 2798-2013, required by charter to forward. We are required by charter to forward it to the Board of Elections for placement on the ballot. The charter requires council act via ordinance forthwith. This ordinance forwards the petition initiative ordinance to the Board of Elections for placement on the May 6, 2014 ballot. It also instructs the board to validate the sufficiency of the petitions, and it includes requested ballot language. I would move for passage and emphasize that an affirmative vote is required per the charter. Is there a second? Second. Clerk, call the roll by voice.
Craig.
Yes.
Klein. Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
Yes, passed. And finally, in rules and reference this evening is the consideration of Resolution 0269X-2013, and we bring forward a motion from the floor to oppose passage of the proposed petition initiative ordinance, which would enact Chapter 107 of the Columbus City Codes, 1959, and commit taxpayer dollars to fund political campaigns. Council was forced to send flawed ordinance to the Board of Elections. Our duty is to express our grave concerns, as our city officials have done this evening, to the public. This resolution outlines the many challenges we have with the ordinance as proposed, and it expresses formal opposition to the proposed ordinance and provides rationale for council's rejection of it. If there aren't any other comments or questions regarding this resolution, I move for passage. Clerk, call the roll.
Craig Klein. Miller. Mills. Paley. President Ginther.
Resolution is passed. Is there anything else to come before the council this evening? We have several non-agenda speakers that we will take after zoning, and we will reconvene for zoning in 5 minutes. No zoning? We'll reconvene. We'll take our non-agenda speakers momentarily.